the Midtown Fitness Center in Phoenix hummed with its usual post-workday frenzy. Weights clanged, sneakers squeaked across the rubber floor, and music pulsed faintly in the background, blending into the chaos. In the midst of it all, Kendra moved with quiet intensity. At 34, a confident woman with an unshakable focus, she was a study in precision, deadlifts, burpees, pull-ups, each motion honed by years of practice. She wasn't one for small talk, didn't linger, and never sought attention. Her routine was as deliberate as it was intense, and today was no different. Kendra wore her usual gym attire, simple black leggings, a tank top, and earbuds plugged in, sending a clear message: she was here to work, not to chat. As she adjusted the weights on the squat rack, a shadow loomed beside her. A man, probably in his mid-40s, broad-shouldered and clearly a regular in the gym, stood in her space, uninvited and unfamiliar. But there was something about him, something off in the way he carried himself. The way he smirked when she noticed him made her straighten her back instinctively, her muscles tightening in response. "You're using that wrong," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. Kendra removed one earbud, her eyebrow raised in silent challenge. "Excuse me," she asked, her tone neutral but firm. "The weights," he gestured toward the squat rack, his hand sweeping in an exaggerated motion. "You're not setting them up right. You could hurt yourself." A flicker of a smile passed across Kendra's face, small but polite. "Thanks, but I've got it." Her words were clear, her gaze resolute. But he didn't move away. Instead, he crossed his arms and planted himself next to her, a silent declaration of ownership over the space. "I've been coming here for years," he insisted. "Let me show you the proper form." "No need," Kendra replied firmly, her earbuds slipping back into place as she returned to her workout. But the man wasn't ready to let it go. His expression hardened, his smile giving way to a scowl. He muttered something under his breath, something Kendra didn't catch, but she could feel it in the air, sharp and heavy. A few nearby gym-goers glanced over, sensing the tension, but no one intervened. It was the kind of moment where people quietly decided it wasn't their problem, letting it unfold. Kendra continued, her movements fluid and controlled, but the man didn't relent. He hovered, eyes tracking her every step, his muttered critiques growing in volume and frequency. She ignored him, each rep punctuated by the sound of his voice, but she kept moving. Then, as she moved to the bench press, adjusting the weights, he spoke loud enough for the entire gym to hear, "Women like you think they know everything, huh?" Her hands froze mid-motion. The weight of his words hung in the air like a challenge. Slowly, Kendra turned, her expression calm, but her eyes, those eyes, flashed with something much sharper. "What exactly is that supposed to mean?" Her voice cut through the room, quiet but lethal, and the gym seemed to inhale with her. The clatter of weights, the low hum of conversation, all of it receded as a few heads turned, curious, cautious, but not daring to intervene. The man shrugged, his confidence buoyed by the onlookers. "I'm just saying, maybe you should stick to what you're good at." Kendra's gaze lingered on him, unwavering. Then, without a word, she calmly returned to her set. But the silence between them had thickened. There was a line drawn now, invisible but unyielding, and it wouldn't take much for someone to cross it. But the man didn't relent. His words, like a foul aftertaste, clung to the air, feeding the growing unease around them. Kendra could feel his gaze on her, heavy, suffocating, but she ignored it, finishing her set before moving toward the water fountain. The few steps gave her enough time to size him up. Men like him weren't new to her. Arrogant, insecure, desperate for control in spaces where they thought they should reign. She wasn't intimidated, not by him, not by anyone. Years of discipline, of training, had taught her to remain steady, to stay calm under pressure. But even she could feel the heat rising in the room. As Kendra reached for her water bottle, he followed, his presence like an impending storm. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his jaw tight with frustration. "Hey!" His voice cracked through the quiet space like a whip. "I'm talking to you." Kendra's hand tightened on the bottle, but she didn't look at him. She took a deliberate sip, the motion calm, measured. The room seemed to hold its breath, watching for what would come next. But she wasn't about to escalate the situation. Not yet. Look, he continued, his tone now laced with arrogance, you don't have to act all tough if you're struggling. Just say so, and I can help you. Kendra set the bottle down and turned to face him, her eyes narrowing. Struggling? She repeated his words slowly, as though savoring them. The only thing I'm struggling with is your inability to leave me alone. A few nearby gym-goers glanced over, the tension shifting in the air. Some paused their workouts, uncertainty marking their expressions. Would he back off? Would she let it slide? The man, though, only laughed, sharp and humorless, before stepping closer. His posture aggressive, his words cutting. You think you're better than me? He snapped. What makes you so special? Kendra's gaze never wavered, her voice steady, unshaken. Nothing makes me special. But I know how to handle myself. Do you? The question hit like a punch, and the man's face darkened, his anger deepening. He stepped even closer now, his presence towering over her. His voice dropped to a low, threatening tone. You better watch your mouth. The gym held its breath. People could feel it, the tension creeping, like a slow-burning fuse about to explode. A young man on a treadmill hesitated, his eyes flickering between Kendra and the man, unsure of what to do. But Kendra caught his gaze and gave a subtle shake of her head. She didn't need anyone else to step in. Not yet. The man wasn't just angry anymore, he was unraveling. His fists clenched, his body trembling with the intensity of his frustration. He took another step forward, closer, encroaching on her personal space. But Kendra didn't flinch. Instead, she straightened, her posture steady, her eyes locked on his. Calm. Controlled. There was no defiance in her gaze, only precision. You've got a smart mouth, don't you? He spat, his voice echoing off the gym walls, loud enough for everyone to hear. Now, the room was on edge. A few gym employees exchanged anxious whispers behind the counter, uncertain of what to do. Some of the patrons stood frozen, unsure whether to step in. They all felt it, the tension crackling in the air. The confrontation was no longer just a matter of words. It was teetering on the edge of something dangerous. Kendra took a slow, deliberate breath, exhaling the tension out. Her voice, when she spoke again, was clear and unwavering, you need to calm down. She spoke with absolute clarity, her voice cutting through the air, no anger, only the unmistakable weight of authority. There was no question in her words, it wasn't an option. Yet, the effect was the opposite of what one might expect. His reaction? Pure ignition. With one swift motion, he grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her skin, forceful and rough. Gasps echoed around the gym. Kendra didn't flinch. She stood perfectly still, her body quiet, calculating. How would this unfold? What was her next move? What are you going to do about it? He sneered, twisting his grip tighter, almost daring her to react. His words hung in the air, an open challenge. And then, in an instant, everything shifted. Kendra's response was lightning fast, faster than he could process. Her free hand shot up, locking onto his wrist in a grip that felt like steel. The sudden force of her movement was so fluid, so precise, that it left him reeling. With one effortless twist, she forced his hand off of her, pushing him back in a clean reversal of power. The room went silent. His expression morphed from aggression to disbelief as he staggered, clutching his wrist. She stepped back, putting space between them but maintaining a controlled presence, unwavering. Let me make one thing clear, she said, her voice firm, slicing through the stunned silence like a blade. You don't put your hands on me. Ever. He stumbled backward, his bravado slipping away, but the retreat never came. Instead, a roar of frustration ripped from his throat, and with a primal snarl, he lunged forward at her. Kendra didn't move a muscle. With a swift sidestep, she used his momentum against him. Without breaking her stride, she swept his legs from under him, sending him crashing to the mat with a thundering slam. Chaos erupted. Shouts, scrambling feet, and the unmistakable sound of phones clicking into record mode filled the air. The man lay there, dazed, humiliated, his pride shattered. Kendra stood tall over him, her stance grounded and unshakable, her calm cutting through the tension. "You really don't know when to quit, do you?" she murmured, just loud enough for him to hear. For a moment, he considered trying again, his mind clearly in turmoil. But when his eyes met hers, the hesitation was palpable. In her gaze, he saw more than just calm. He saw the weight of years of training, of knowing exactly what to do in moments like these. It was too late. Fear flickered in his eyes, an emotion he'd never anticipated facing from someone like her. But the damage had been done. The entire gym had watched him unravel. The whispers started, low, cautious, as people around the gym processed what they had just witnessed. Kendra stood, unbothered by the attention, her breathing steady. Her eyes scanned the room, a silent challenge daring anyone else to make a move. The man, still shaken and humiliated, slowly pulled himself off the ground. His face was a mix of anger, confusion, and shame. "You're crazy," he spat, pointing at her like a trapped animal. "You think you can just—" Kendra's voice cut him off, sharp and deliberate. "Enough. You've embarrassed yourself enough for one day. Leave." A gym employee, a young woman with wide eyes and trembling hands, stepped forward. "Sir," she said, her voice unsure but determined. "You need to go. Now." For a moment, the man considered resisting, but the weight of the stares around him, some angry, others full of disgust, began to settle on him. His shoulders slumped as he backed away, muttering under his breath. He grabbed his bag and stormed out, the door rattling as he shoved it open with a force that mirrored his frustration. The moment he left, the gym exhaled. The tension that had been thick in the air seemed to lift. Then, a single clap. Another joined in. And before long, a ripple of applause began to spread across the gym. Kendra raised a hand, signaling for silence. "It's over," she said, her tone firm yet calm. The gym returned to its rhythm, some returning to their workouts, others still casting glances her way, whispering, processing. A young man approached her cautiously, phone still in hand. "That was incredible," he said, awe evident in his voice. "Are you like a martial artist or something?" Kendra offered a brief smile, but her eyes remained focused. "Something like that," she replied, offering no more. Another gym-goer, a middle-aged woman, stepped forward, concern written on her face. "Are you okay?" "That was terrifying to watch." "I'm fine," Kendra replied, her voice steady. "Thank you for asking." The young woman from the front desk appeared again, wringing her hands. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. I should have stepped in sooner." Kendra met her eyes, her expression softening. "You did what you could," she reassured her. The employee nodded, still uneasy. "We should call the police. He might come back." Kendra paused for a moment, considering the suggestion. Then, with absolute certainty, she replied, "No need. He's not coming back. Trust me." There was no room for doubt in her voice. With that, she turned and walked toward the locker room to grab her things. But even as she moved away, the weight of what had just happened hung in the air. The murmurs continued, the event still fresh in the minds of everyone who had witnessed it. As she entered the locker room, Kendra's steps were measured, purposeful. She caught her reflection in the mirror, a calm face staring back. No signs of triumph, no self-congratulation. This wasn't about proving a point to anyone. It wasn't about seeking attention. It was about making a statement. A clear, simple one: respect is not optional. She packed her things quietly, letting the adrenaline fade, and as she zipped up her bag, the young woman from the front desk cautiously entered. "Can I ask you something?" Tara asked, her voice tentative. Kendra turned, her gaze steady but kind. Sure. Tara hesitated, her words tumbling out. How did you stay so calm? I mean, he was so aggressive, and you just handled it. How? Kendra leaned back against the bench, folding her arms, her expression thoughtful. It's not about staying calm, she said. It's about knowing you can handle yourself. Fear loses its grip when you're prepared. Tara tilted her head, absorbing the wisdom in Kendra's words. So, you're trained like military or something? Kendra nodded, her expression unwavering. I served as a Navy SEAL for over a decade. I've faced worse situations than what happened out there. Tara's eyes widened. Wow. That explains a lot. Kendra's gaze remained serious. But it's not just about training, she continued. It's about understanding when to act and when to let things go. He wasn't just angry. He was insecure. People like that look for easy targets. When you show them you're not one, they don't know how to react. Tara absorbed the words, the weight of them settling in. I wish I could be that brave. You can, Kendra said simply. Bravery isn't about not being scared. It's about standing firm when it matters. Just then, the middle-aged woman who had checked on Kendra earlier entered the locker room. Sorry to interrupt, she said softly, but I just wanted to thank you. You handled that with so much grace. Honestly, it made me think about how often I let people walk all over me. Kendra smiled faintly. Standing up for yourself isn't always easy, but it's necessary. Not just for you, but for everyone watching. The woman nodded thoughtfully. You're right. I think I needed to see that. Kendra slung her bag over her shoulder. We all need reminders sometimes. As she stepped out into the cool evening air, Kendra felt a quiet resolve settle over her. She hadn't planned for any of this, but maybe, just maybe, it was meant to happen. Perhaps someone in that gym needed to see what strength looked like, not in physical power, but in composure, in resilience, and in refusing to let ignorance win. But as she walked to her car, Kendra knew that the story wasn't just about her. It was about everyone in that gym who left with a new perspective, a new understanding of respect, courage, and the dangers of underestimating someone based on assumptions. The gym emptied out slowly that evening, but the ripple of the confrontation lingered in the air, weaving through conversations, shifting the dynamics of the regulars. Tara, still shaken but inspired, sat at the counter after her shift, scrolling through her phone. The video of Kendra's poised yet decisive actions was already circulating online, filled with admiration, disbelief, and introspection. People marveled at what they'd witnessed. How had they all missed the signs before? Why had they hesitated? What would they have done differently? The incident had forced people to confront something deeper than just a moment of conflict. It had stirred reflection, pushing them to examine their assumptions, their reactions, and their silence. Kendra sat at home that evening, sipping tea with her dog curled at her feet. Her phone buzzed with messages, thank you, praise, questions. She appreciated the kindness, but she didn't see herself as a hero. For her, it wasn't about the spotlight. It was about standing firm in the face of injustice, no matter how large or small the stage. The following week, Kendra returned to the gym, as unassuming as ever. But this time, people greeted her with something different in their eyes, respect. Tara approached her shyly, holding out a card. I just wanted to say thanks, she said. You've inspired me. Kendra opened the card later at home. It read, simply, you reminded me that strength comes in many forms. Thank you for showing me what it means to truly stand tall. It wasn't just Tara who had learned something that day. Everyone who had witnessed the confrontation, or even just heard about it, walked away with a lesson. Respect is earned, not given lightly. Strength isn't about size or bravado. It's about resolve and courage. It's the quiet act of standing firm when the world expects you to crumble. The man, meanwhile, had vanished from the gym, likely overwhelmed by shame or fear. But his actions had left an indelible mark, not the one he'd intended, but a lesson for all who had watched. As Kendra reflected on the incident, one thought stood out above the rest. Maybe the world didn't need more heroes. Maybe it just needed more people willing to stand their ground and demand the respect they deserved.